Hello everyone, welcome back. Another left-hander. This is Barry's Ibanez. I forgot the number, so if I look on the back, it will tell us that it's a RG421 EX L. Yeah, made in Korea, Indonesia. Anyway, beautiful looking thing. It's a recent acquisition for him. In the classic black style, so that the slightest bit of dust gets on it and you can't do anything about it. You might notice that it's currently got black frets. That's because I've already marked them up. I sort of did a bit of sorting out the things I need off screen. One of the things I think, and I've got all the information I need, except I have forgotten right now what gauge of strings he wants on this, and I think it's 9s. I think he wanted to go from 10s to 9s. And I am waiting for delivery of 9s. So in the meantime, what I'm going to do at the end of this setup is I'm going to put some sacrificial spare 9s on, but I'm going to and do the intonation. But I'll change them and redo it when I get the 9s in. So that will just be for the sake of finishing the job. So on this, it's one of those, I want it to be as good as it can be, numbers. And what's nice about this guitar is that being an Ibanez, it's a beautifully simple design. You can see the contours are really sweet, simple cutaway, that little stepped back number there. There's probably a good reason for it. I know some guitars, they have, you know, a third one, the G step back, and as well as the low E. I don't know, but anyway, it looks weird. You can see the construction of the neck here. It's a nice maple. The ferrule held neck, dusty, sort of standardish tuners. So the nice thing about this is there's nothing kind of overwhelmingly sort of sci-fi or anything about it, but it's elegant. It's got the super strat lines. It's kind of got this sort of nice little piping around the edge on this to give it detail. And it's got what I think here is a bit of a, what they call them, sort of a, I don't know what they would say in Ibanez territory, but it looks like one of those graphite type nuts. But we're replacing it with the appropriate left-handed, this one. It has a curve to it, whereas this one doesn't, but it's the correct size and spacing. Now, this guitar came to me, and there's a couple of things I noticed about it. One is that there is some, it's hard to hear, perhaps unless I twang this. This is buzzing out already, and if I am to look under there, try and steady it, there's that low E is practically sitting on the first fret. The others, so it goes on the low E, the first fret action, as you can see from here, goes from on the low E practically nothing to 1/2 mil. We've got 0 relief, so those two things are connected, and that's a thing to look out for. So if you get a guitar that has open string buzzing, okay, you want to look at the first fret action on the buzzing strings, and in this case you can see there's no, so that explains one of the reasons why that low E is buzzing. But if you also measure or observe and find you've got 0 relief, that will be another reason why it'll be buzzing. So 0 relief plus a very, very low or non-existent first fret action will be recipe for trouble. So the good news is we can fix that by two things: replacing the nut with a better cut Tusq nut, and also by dialing in a tiny bit of relief. When we look at the action on this one, high and low E at the last fret where I measure it came in at 1.6, and I would be looking for 1.5, no more, and about 1.2 there. So there's a little bit of improvement we can make, but we wouldn't be able to make that improvement currently the way the neck is set up. So the question is, if the three things the three things? The things I'm going to do to this guitar are pretty standard. So first one is, well, we have to think of the order. Let's not put the order on them. Let's put things we've got to do. Replace nut. And in that comes setting the correct first fret action. I'm going to set, maybe put it another way. No. Let's put set first fret. Then we're going to set last fret. We're going to set neck relief. And these three things, the first fret action, the last fret action, and the relief, together, those three things equal what I call my action. Okay, you could argue that other things are your actions, such as how hard you hit it, such as how thick the strings are, such as the scale of the neck and so on, or the guitar and so on. But broadly speaking, there are three basic gross major components to the playing action, and those are the three I've got to set. Once I've done that, kind of whichever order they come in, once I've done that, is I'm going to precision level the frets with the guitar fully strung and the neck relieved. See, that leads to there. And then we're going to do other things like recrown, sand and polish the frets, and we're going to do a sort of all over clean up and check, and then obviously somewhere in there we're going to restring, stretch out the strings, and set the intonation. So there's a handful of things, and in a way that's pretty much standard to every job. And what changes each time is not really the aspects of the job, because, and this is something I was talking to Colin about this morning, who passed by to drop some guitars for setup. And one of the things I was saying was that with experience, you sort of get to trust that there is nothing super mysterious about any guitar. You know, there are lots of complicated and interesting things, but by and large, they are a neck, wooden neck of some sorts, usually wooden, with frets, with a bridge at one end, and a nut at the other end, and some pickups to make a noise and so on. And actually, guitars that are essentially like this, no matter how complicated or exotic they are, they basically follow the same requirements. In other words, the same starting conditions. So first of all, they all have more or less uneven frets by virtue of the crudeness of the process of fretting. That's a fact. They have uneven frets when you load the guitar up into playing configuration, because the guitar is, the strings are pulling this end towards this end, and they're pulling it, compressing it and trying to bend it upwards, so you get a curve in the neck, and you also get compression in the longitudinal sense, which further adds to various ups and downs in the neck. And those are unpredictable because the neck material is unpredictable, and of course manufacturers use different materials. They also use laminates and so on to minimize that, but in essence, whilst it's still wood, it will behave curiously and idiosyncratically, you could say. And so that's your starting conditions, and within those starting conditions there are certain limitations you can't buck, and that is that any string needs to, you know, I'd never see it on a small string, but any string that is struck needs to move. You can't buck that, right? There's no miracle way around that. The harder you hit it, the more it has to move. So by the rules of physics, you have to have enough room for the strings to move. That means you can't, I know it sounds obvious, but you can't have zero height for your action. You have to have some combination of settings that gives your strings enough room to move freely without clattering on the frets or without being choked off altogether. And that's created in a number of ways. It's created, I'm sorry I'm going into a long-winded thing here, but some people might find it useful. So the space for your strings to move is created either by a combination of really three things. The height of your bridge at this end, the curvature of your neck with your little frets along the way, badly drawn, and the height of your saddle, your nut at the other end. And so you can see that between those three things and various degrees of it, you create more or less room. There's the string, lots of room, and the string kind of spins in this double cone shaped thing, more in the middle than at the end. So you can see very crudely, you've got some height at either end, you've got a bit of curvature, and those three things together give you the space for the strings to move. Now, for example, you could say, well, look, it's moving freely in there. What we could afford to do is flatten out that neck a bit. Fine. So the height of the nut and the bridge give you a space to flatten the neck out a little bit. If, however, this was lower and this double cone was lower, nearer to the frets, you said, well, actually, I prefer to have a flatter neck. Well, a flatter neck will make this part of the moving strings hit the fretboard. So you can't. You know, if you start with a low action at the nut and the saddle, you can't. There's a limit to how low you can go or how flat you can go. So it's basically a game of compromises, right? And people don't like the word compromise, but it's always some sort of compromise between at least these three things. But actually there's more. There's the sort of strength of hit. Okay, how hard somebody hits it. Then another effect in here is the scale length. So the shorter the scale length, the looser the strings are and the more they move around. Another thing here is also the gauge of strings. The lighter they are, the more they move around and so on. So there's a few things, but in terms of if you're a player, you've got the scale length given. It's a standard scale length, let's say. Strength of hit, well, I'm a heavy player, that's given. I know how I play. I know what strings I play with. And so the issue here is you have to adjust these things here. Well, you could adjust all of them, right? You could have a really low, you could go for a low action if you cut down the strength of your hit. You could get a lower action if, for all these things being equal, you went for a fatter gauge of strings, which would be tighter and less movement for the same sort of note and volume. So you can see that in all of these, you can adjust all of them to get the thing you want, depending on what it is you're aiming for. So all of those variables are interrelated, so they all affect each other, but they're all adjustable depending on the one that you care about. Now, a lot of people, when they come for a setup, they want, they already have their scale length. This guitar is a 648, I would guess. I haven't measured it, but it's a super strat. Scale length is given, which tends to be the longer of the scale lengths that we use, so the strings will be tighter, pound for pound. We've got the gauge of strings. In this case, the 10s are on here, but we might be ending up with 9s, that's fine. And we've got the style of play of the player, which is often an unknown for me because it's quite difficult to know, and partly because it's very subjective to measure or difficult to measure. So that comes in as a bit of an unknown. I had a situation, a setup a little while back for Ryan, where I set it up to a nice low action, which he wanted, the lowest possible, lowest, lightest action, did all of that. And one of the things I didn't get clear about with him was how hard he played, and I didn't see him play. So it turns out that he played unusually hard, and of course we had a little buzzing when everything was done. It didn't buzz for me when I did it, but it ended up buzzing for him, quite simply because he hit it twice as hard as me. So I had to make an adjustment and do a little bit more leveling and a tiny adjustment on the neck relief to make it work for him with his strength of hit. So it's always a compromise with all those things. Now, given this guitar, we say with the scale length built in, we've got the gauge of strings. I'm going to make a dangerous assumption that the strength of hit is, average-ish, not superhumanly hard. Now, if I level and do my setup for that, and it turns out that the person hits harder, what I normally recommend is you just adjust one of these things to make the compromise. And it's a simple one, and it's down this end. I would recommend raising that by 1/4 of a millimeter at a time, and that's a 1/4 of a turn clockwise to raise on each of the grub screws in that kind of saddle, on a Strat style saddle, and that will raise the saddles up at a predictable height. But that's the extra space you have to give it for the strings to move if you're a heavy hitter. You could make a truss rod adjustment too to give yourself a little bit more room. I would like people to be comfortable to do that, because it's something you need to do all year round as the weather and temperature changes, but a lot of people shy away a bit from that. So I still keep trying to encourage them to do it. Anyway, that sort of explanation aside, that it sort of gives you an idea of the things that I set out to do with the setup set out to do. And the question often is, of these things, which do I do first? So what I know is that there's not enough neck relief. So I know that straight away something has to be adjusted before I can really make sense of the other ones. So I've got them here as presented, but I know that if I adjust the neck relief, it will slightly change the other things. So I guarantee you, if I made an adjustment to the neck relief now, the first fret E will probably stop buzzing, which still may not be the answer to everything, but it would be a good start point. If I lowered the action first and then did change the neck relief, then I would need to make another adjustment on the action. So the question of which to adjust first is a sort of difficult one, and my only real answer to that is to do the grossest of the three variables. So we've got first fret action, last fret action, and neck relief. And I would say the one that seems most off, take care of that first, and then really examine the other ones. Don't assume that I can measure up these three as I've done, wherever they are, and then just do one and leave the other two. You've got to recheck, but you pretty quickly reach the place where they're all in order. Now, the thing I've got here is I probably need to just lightly push this out of the way to open it up. I need the strings on, obviously, to do this, because I need the neck under load. Now, the way I would measure the neck relief, if I can just get a mirror view, it's quite simple. Is you get your guitar, I'm doing it sort of right-handed, but if you were left-handed, you would use the bottom string, but it would be the other way. But on a right-handed guitar, I take the E string, hold it on the first and last fret, and then gently press down in the middle between the two positions. And there should be some gap, and there is practically none. So this comes down to the question of how much relief do you need in a guitar neck, and the answer is more than none, but only a tiny bit more than none. So there is none in there, so we need to give it a little bit more than none. So we go with our, should be a 4mm hex key, which it is, and I've done maybe a 8th turn, 6th turn, and that's counterclockwise, which should slacken the truss rod a little bit. There's a fraction of movement, but it's still practically dead flat. So people love a dead flat neck, and that's fine to have that as your goal, but you have to remember in the compromise relationship, or the interdependency I pointed out, that if you do want the feel of a supremely flat neck, you're going to have to pay for it in some other variable, or you have to, you pay for it in another variable. So this at the moment is actually not really responding to my adjustments. I've now gone into the positive relief dialing in part of the adjustment. Now it is a little bit, I can get a tiny bit of relief, but it's actually having to turn it quite hard So we've just recovered the buzzing, but it's still it's cut too low, or the nut is shaved too low anyway. So we kind of know that, which is one of the reasons we're going to change it. The question is given these strings, we need this guitar to have the right amount of relief to begin with, and it doesn't want to be absolutely none. If we want it to be absolutely none, we will have to pay for it in terms of slightly raised, fractionally raised action, and or lighter hitting. Okay, lighter play. Now this is just now created a little bit of space, but it's very little, and I would say that neck is not very responsive, but we'll see how it changes. If it changes, I've always not really been a great believer in the fact that the idea that necks change very, very slowly. I'm not sure they do. I think they either respond or they don't. That's making it play. It still is too low an action, but so that's the first of my variables I've got to do. So in a way, the relief should be the first of them, because the relief needs to be is a good start point. So I'm going to say neck relief is number, or let's call it A because I've used letters. So A is neck relief because it's the one that should be right regardless of what these other ones are doing. They're interdependent in terms of the action, but whatever I do with these two doesn't change the amount of loading on the neck and how much it curves. That's going to stay the same even if we change these up and down. Of course, the action, how it plays, is interdependent, but the curvature of the neck, it's an important distinction, but it seems a bit sort of obscure. But that's why the relief is the good one to change first, or to organize first, because it doesn't change after that. It is a function of the amount of force of these strings on this neck, and it doesn't change whether you have a huge tall nut or a low action at the saddle or a high action. The loading on the neck will still be the same. So the first one to do, because of that, do the neck relief first. Then these two now are, if we're looking at first fret action, they will be interconnected now. So if I were to go and lower set the perfect action now on the bridge, or shall I say the last fret action, as I would call it. Let me go and do that, and then we will look again at what that does to the first fret action. So here we have over 1.6. Now I draw a cheeky little line on the end of my adjuster thing, my hex thing, because that gives me a chance to do 0.5 millimeter. So if I want to drop this, I'm going to go 0.5 millimeter counterclockwise on both these grub screws to lower this 0.5 millimeter, and that takes me, in fact that's probably only need a quarter of that. So let's go to 1/4 of a mil off that one there at this end, and we'll check that one's actually higher. Of course, when I measured the last fret high and low, obviously these in between can be all over the place, so it is worth now going through them individually one by one. So this is at 1.75, so again I want to take off, back off 1.75. What do I want here? I want 1.5 max, so 0.25 again, quarter, and a tiny bit more because I want this to go lower slightly, because I'm going to try to put a gradient between 1.2 and 1.5, so it's a bit of a not hit and miss, but you're kind of spreading it out across 6 saddles. So I'm going to again go just over 1/4 here, and I'm watching my little adjuster marker here, and this is coming out at 1.7-ish. So again the same. Now here we want to go about starting to go towards 0.5. so nearly a 180. So that's not bad. There we go, just under 1.5. And now we're going to go on this one nearly 180 again, and we should be coming into the sort of action that target action that we want. And obviously the change would be, the adjustment would be bigger at the at this end. So that's looking at, that's still actually too high. That's still 1.5. So we've got 0.3 still to take off. So do a little bit more on this one, a little bit more on this one. Now once you're there-ish, you can carry on doing it as a measurement, which is actually quite hard to see, and it's not scientifically precise, I have to tell you. And then what you can probably end up doing is doing more of a look across here. Now I tend to look down and across these strings, and they tend to give me a good look at how the curve of the strings and how they relate to each other. Even though they go over a curve, the radius here, I still want to see them spaced equally. I don't want to see any relatively large gaps between any of them. That's actually not far off. That's pretty good. And it's a, as I say, sometimes I get down to eyeball level by this point. Now, having adjusted that, what I do know is that then changes the tuning. So just to keep the loads the same, I go back and retune. So if we revisit, the relief is the same. It's the same loading, maybe a little bit tighter on the string, but only a fraction. Same basic loading, so we've got the basic relief dialed in first. Tiny bit of movement, fine. Very flat still, but with a little space. Then I looked at the action at this end, which then comes down and tells me I've got different actions at this end. So I'm not going to go through measuring them each because it's not really that important, particularly if we're going to change and put a replacement nut in, which I will do next. So the order was first that one, relief, secondly the last fret action, I call it, via the bridge, and then third will be replace the nut and set the first fret action. And then the truth is, a change now in the first fret action will have a tiny change in this one, and we check it again. So the D, if there is anything in this order, is recheck all. So there's an A, B, C, and D there, and then we kind of tiniest tweaks then to arrive where we want to be. So the next part to change this is to slack off the strings, and this is where these strings do a good service as we'll call them sacrificial strings, because now I need to undo this nut and get ourselves fitted with the ideal one. Now the thing about the nut we're going to fit is, before I fit it, before I take this one off, I'm going to make sure I have a good sort of eyeball. Now this one, let's have a close-up-ish. This one here, I'm going to need to take off this little protector unit here. And the reason it's a nice unit that you can do the normal changes to the truss rod or normal adjustments without taking this off, which is handy. But because I want to take this nut off, I've got to remove this so it doesn't end up banging into this. So that can sit there for the time being. So what I'm looking at here is how, if and how this has been attached to here. And this is an age-old problem. You may be able to see that right up close, about thereabouts, we have what could be a bit of finish riding up and sticking to the nut, or it might just not be. It doesn't look like it's stuck there, and if we run a blade along, it doesn't appear to be any major thing stuck there. We can do the same along here, although this is a lot crunchier, so the blade's going to have to kind of go down a bit more, and it tends to then try to cut into the side of the nut. It's not easy to do because it's not a clean joint. Anyway, so the other thing then is we have to decide by what means is this attached to there, and we're really looking for signs of come on, can we focus? We're looking to see how is it lacquered in by the finish on the headstock. Well, it doesn't look like it to me. Is it heavily glued in? Is it over finished with lacquer or anything? You know, if I tap this, is it likely to break or shatter a whole load of stuff? And the way it's fitted there, I would say the answer is no. And you can't know for sure. You can only make an educated guess and then take your chances. But before I do that, let's get our PT6114 LO. And the first thing we're going to do is double check the thingy, the spacings. Now what I noticed straight away is it is a fraction narrower in the body than this one, and this one it's hard to measure, but this one probably at the base of it sticks out further, and this one is probably something like, very hard to do in this position, it's got about 5/8 written there, so we're about a millimetre's difference by the look of this. Now I don't think I've got any others. This was listed as the correct nut, would you believe? So I'm going to have a quick look into my department of lefties, out of shot over here. Lefties, left-handed, lefties. And we've got lefty Epiphone, which is thicker, which probably has almost the same spacing, but it's not black. Okay. So, this is what you get when you buy Tusq's nearest version. Let's double check if I've got any other lefties in the black Tusq department. Sometimes I have extra spare ones. No, 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 no. No, 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 no. Okay. So, that's it. That's a right-handed one. Okay. So let's have a think. I'm going to tap this. So when we look at a situation like this, so we're thinking, right, we've got the recommended nut, and it's not as deep in its front to backness as the one that's coming off, the plasticky so-called graphite one. Now what do we know? Well, we can't use this one because that's too low, full stop. It actually looks like it's been cut with a file too low, and in an attempt to make it play the right sort of height. Now we've got this one here, which is the correct or better, far better material, and we've got a slight bit of a bump here with glue which needs cleaning up, and so we're short by a tiny amount here. Now the only question I've got is, will this here mostly cover up that tiny underrun? I think it will. It's the right nut width-wise, and that's the important thing. So I think that's what we'll aim for. So this is where they've put they've used a load of glue here. I don't know how well you can see this. Load of glue, and it's gone up inside this hollow base of the what do you call it, that thingy nut, and it's it's resulted in quite a chunk of stuff, glue sticking up. It's gone up into the cutaways, and it ends up making a pronounced thing. So to clean it up, we've got this little nut slot file, but the problem with it is, well, it's not very savage. So it seems to, it's the kind of thing that take forever to clean up that shelf, which isn't a bad thing, by the way, that it's slow. I mean, it's, in a way, it's far better to be slow and steady than to kind of rush it and take away tons of material, because then you'd end up with a very uneven shelf. So what I want first of all is a properly smoothed out nut shelf before anything else. So part of the thing is to make sure that any glue that's on this front edge here, and there's a fair bit, is kind of cleared up. Again, it's sort of a mixture of careful scraping and removing. If this was my guitar, I would probably, in fact I can do it on this one, just put a little marker pen black here just to cover up that that colour. We've got a permanent marker there, and we've got a permanent Sharpie here. So there's a little bit of white right on this edge here that we can cover up. There you go. Barely even notice it. So I'm going to go back to this super glue. Can make a very difficult to file material. This is a Hosco nut shelf file. So what we'd be looking for is to get as smooth a surface as we can. Sometimes a blade like this can also help to move larger amounts of sticking up stuff. It's also quite good because it tends to maintain quite a flat, straight edge as well. And it should tell you quite quickly when it's the right shape, because your new nut should want to sit comfortably on there. And right now there's still what feels to be a little, some sort of raised area. It's the if it's the original, where it wants to go right into the front edge. I think there's kind of a tip forward here. I think it's this part of the shelf that's uneven. So working with a file like this is, you've really got to try and keep it even. See that little movement there? Now this one didn't do it because it's actually cut with a bit of a slope. I actually have a feeling that it is. Yeah, I think that's what they've done. Okay, so we've got a couple of little things. The front edge here is not quite square cut, so there's bits of glue kind of sticking You can hear it digging into something that's in the way. I don't know how, well, you can see just about. So I'm trying to cut back this glue, and you can see the glue stuff coming off. It's quite difficult to do this. It's obviously slightly dinging the strings as well, but they're okay. They're sacrificial strings, so we don't care too much about them. Yeah. So I'm just going to look sideways at the joint. Yeah, so that's not a very straight shelf, courtesy of the original glue that's gone on there. And this is quite narrow and fairly difficult to get to work. I'm thinking whether there is, I don't think there's another version of this with the same spacing. I'm wondering whether I might, I'm wondering out loud whether it makes sense to go and double check. This surface is not good at all. It's amazing. Doesn't help that I've got these strings in the way. So one of the things that I can see first of all is that once you put all that glue on, the vertical edge doesn't feel very clean. So sometimes it's worth even getting a very small chisel out like this, which I can see as I'm doing this is only cutting glue, but I'm trying to sort of bring this back to flush, and I can feel chunks of glue going to get in the way of things here like that. And this, I can't really afford to have that because it really needs to, or wants to sit up flush to that edge. So I'm thinking out loud whether I put this on hold. I might actually do this. It's not that common that I would take a break on something like this, but I may go and make one further effort to find a wider nut than this with the same spacing dimensions, but if it doesn't have one, then we have to make it work with what we've got. So let's see, this, I can feel the glue crunching off here. Quite a lot there in the middle too. The idea being eventually you get to a much closer fit. So that, on the front edge, that feels quite good. All that's missing now is probably a tiny bit of adjustment on the bottom, because the angle between, sorry, I'm running away from you picture wise, the angle between the face of the fretboard end and the nut shelf is not always perfectly 90 degrees, and what you want to have is just a little bit of leeway to sand your new nut until it fits, and that's much better. Nearly there. you want to be able to sand it until it fits comfortably. Let's feel the end of this. I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, for the sake of a millimetre, it would put me on hold. For the sake of a millimetre, add some more time. It would be a couple of days before it arrived, blah blah blah. That would be early next week. What day are we on? Thursday. Yeah. Right. Let's have a think. I think what I want to do is let's go ahead and I'll use this nut in. I was going to say, if I use it in anger, then it's put it to work, then it's no longer available for anything else. So I'll be chucking a nut away. Chucking a nut away. Okay, that is a nice, nearly nice fit. It's got a little tip back there, but that's because of the general not flatness of this here shelf, which is a pity. It's a shame. Sorry, am I out of sight now? Yes, probably am. Something like that. What I'm just trying to look at is the overall flatness here. It does feel uneven. A ton of glue. That's amazing. That's amazing. And of course with glue, you can get glue on there and it'll stop it moving, but I'm always desperate to get it to stay put from the outset, because I don't like packing it with glue to stopping it move. And that's our problem, is that we don't have a device that's going to fix this angle disparity other than slow work with this here file, which I'm hoping will do as best I can with it. But if it's already got a sort of a roll off on one edge, then there's not a lot we can do short of chiseling it, which I really don't like to do. What I'm just going to do for my own peace of mind here is I'm just going to make sure that the base of this nut is actually flat before I stress any more about it, because if it isn't, that's one of the things that makes the whole thing a bit pointless. Okay, so it's tilting back. Okay, so now what we may have, and let's just do a little adjustment now, we may have everything right, but the tiny thing that now may be wrong is the finest tune bit of all, which is very difficult to get, and it's the angle of the nut. So, the first problem I've got is I've got to, let's just take this away a minute. Come back into view, probably. Doink. There we are. So if I were, probably very, very optimistic putting black marker pen on the frets, by the way. So if I just put all these strings back on, we'll tighten this up for a minute. And what I'll do is I'm going to measure the nut for how much I would need to remove to get it to the correct height. So I'll start in the middle because it's free moving. Just sort of hold it down with these two. Looks sort of good. So getting the nut to the right first fret action is a not challenging, but it's very careful work. That's sitting there quite nicely. Just going to make sure that it's sitting as tidily in the right position as it can be. So to do that, I'm just going to gently tap the nut and make sure it's up against the edge. Okay, that's not a bad position. What I'm going to do while I'm there, just kind of have a look and see how it would look fitted. It's sort of difficult to line anything up when you can't access it, so it would be sort of like that. Yeah, I mean, it's not the end of the world. Okay, let's just look to begin with what the heights are we've got here. Let's take that out. So I'm kind of half in between stopping altogether and going and looking for an alternative before I reduce this at all, because in a sense it doesn't make any logical sense if I'm not going to use this to make any customization. So we had the other one. No, where was the other one? Where was the other one? No, not that one. Lost. Lefty bits. Is this my lefty bit? Oh yeah, my lefty bits. This one, I'm not sure this is the right. This has a wide enough spacing anyway. It looks like the wide enough. I would say that's slightly too narrow. I don't think I want to go with that. Oh no, it's the same. It's the same. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to look. I'm going to look because this one says it's an Epiphone equivalent. So let's just look and see if this is the right size. It's just another option. I think what will be the case is that it'll give me an option if there is no other black nut that comes anywhere close to being the right width and the left-handed. See, that's the better width. It's actually a fraction over. We need to bring that down a tiny bit, but that's the right width. And it's slightly, it sort of follows the binding. What do we do? Do we use this one, make it work, which kind of follows the binding colour, or do we go and pause the whole thing for a replacement? I wonder if my thing will tell me. What is this piece? This piece here is called a 6060 LO. We want a PT 6060. Sorry about this boredom. PT. I don't like not getting things done. PT 6060 LO. Huh. You're joking me. PT 6060. PT 6060 XL. $6060 LO. PT 6060 LO. Okay. What's this one? Ooh, okay, that could be better. I'll have to pay full money for it. 6060. Let's just check the number. Of course, it doesn't have the blasted number, does it? Name it. This item. 1/4 inch SL, 1/4 inch nut. Give me the actual proper number, you devil. Right, 6061. Right, so what's that one doing? See, they're cheeky swines, they'll sell you the wrong one, just like that. 6060 LO on reverb, that's no good. I want a fast, I need a fast thing. Northwest, 6010, nope. 6060 eBay, 6060 LO eBay, 66. I don't want the white one, I want the black one. PT 6060 shopping, 6060 LO. We know that one will get to me. Fastest delivery, but wait a minute, I'm Prime member, I should get it free delivery on your first order. What? I'm already... this is where I get swindled. Create an account. Oh, you absolute... It's not got my details. Hellfire. Crying out loud. Amazon password. Thanks for that. I already tried to get you to sign in with that. How about you add it for me? You sent me a thing to my Huawei. Notification sent to Huawei. Sorry, this is really boring, isn't it? Doink. Any notification? Huawei. Notification, anybody? Where did it send it? Emails? No. Messages, mail, messages, phone, email. Well, that's kind of stuff to me. This is rubbish. Please do me a favour. Sorry about this. I'm trying to sign up. No. It's got my address in there, so how the hell doesn't it know I'm me? PT 6060 LO. Thursday, September the 1st. No, that's next week. How come it finds completely different things to the previous look? Half-deck black, not sorted, lefty. 2 in stock, Wednesday the 31st of August. So actually can't get. No. Wednesday, it's next Wednesday, isn't it? We're on Thursday today, so that's no good to me. Aye. 60 yellow. Well, we know that one works. I think I'm going to have to put this on hold. Bloody annoying. Okay. Pause. What can I do? What can I do usefully? Can I do the fret leveling with this original nut? I probably can, actually, but I can't correct this original thing. It's too low. It's cut too low, so it's no good to reuse. That isn't going to do us any good. I don't want to use a whole nut just to get down to the right size and then replace it with another one, because that's 10 quid down the drain. This one works. It's just for the look of the thing. Damn it. And that is the same. I mean, annoyingly, this is the one that the thing told me would be right for the Ibanez, which it isn't. But this one is better. And I can't seem to find it in this version of Amazon. I don't know what I'm doing there. Go away. Go away. Go away. Right. Free delivery. What day is it? Thursday. Glued to music. Pre-2015 style. What does that mean? Can you just give me the part number? 606000. That's a right-handed one, so don't mess me about. You specifically want the LO, and they give you the right-handed ones. LO reverb. Who's this? 4 quid shipping. 4 quid shipping. That's £15. Are you kidding me? Ivor Morantz. No, matey. This is where the phone really doesn't work very well. Okay, I'm going to have to stop and figure this out. Oh well, back in a minute. And we're back again with the left-handed Ibanez 421. And new nut temporarily in place. Got to exactly the right height. Had to shim it a tiny bit underneath with another piece of Tusq, which I then very carefully sanded down to fit. I had to do that quite a lot recently. They seem to be they seem to be short of correct tallness nuts for various things. I'm finding a bit of a shortage of the right fitting things. Anyhow, so after a few days waiting for these nuts to come in, and now having got the right nut in place, in fact I've got two, another spare on the shelf, I'm now going to go on with the fret leveling, and we get this finished, this setup complete. So it's a Thursday afternoon, evening, just coming into evening, or 6 o'clock, and I think it's past the summer now. We've kind of gone over the line into what's going to be autumn before too long. So I think the last dependable good day of hammock weather is gone, which is an important measurement in my world. But anyway, that's history. So from now on it's going to probably be a bit autumny, wintry, heading towards winter, but we shall see. It may give us a bit more pleasant, warmish weather for a while, or dryish weather. So a quick look at the fret leveling on here. We've got a high fret there, so average, high, average, 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 lowish, average, low spot here. So we've got a couple of noticeable low spots, I would say, there and there particularly. So that will be where we get our sort of fret slap, or even any fret buzzing that we'll have will come from there. So I'll just give it a test play. No, wrong string. That's pretty good. I'm just going to double check the playing action here. When I remember back 5 minutes ago when you last saw this, it was only minutes ago, this had no relief in it at all, and so it was causing the strings to buzz, so it wasn't fantastic. So we've dialed that out, put a little bit of relief in there now, and now I'm just going to take this action down a tiny amount. Going to do a tiny bit more in there because I think those low spots are going to just introduce a tiny bit of fret slap back in, and that's what we'd expect. It's usually, in fact almost always, the result or the consequence of having a patch of low frets or individual low frets. So actually I think we're just about alright there, and we've taken off a bit of extra height here to bottom out this low spot, and that's pretty much exactly what we'd want to do, so quite happy with that. And again, experience tells me that that's not a lot of leveling on any neck, so I'm comfortable with that amount. In other words, it's not very costly in fret metal, so don't have any qualms about doing it. So now moving over to the A track, and I'm keeping the same calibration on this only because I can't recalibrate meaningfully, so I use this first calibration twice for these two tracks. And again, having a look at this, similar thing showing up, high spot here, high one there, little high spot here, highish spot there, but we're just about getting to the bottom of all the others. So the low spots are less pronounced now as we go across, which is fine. Should get all the notes playing well out of here. Yay! Yeah. Right, now I'm going to recalibrate as we move across to the D track. So here we are, another summer done. Heading now towards the next season, and I'm a bit of a summer person, as you can probably guess, mainly because I like to spend kind of relaxing downtime outside in a hammock listening to something on the headphones or reading a book. And when the weather changes, life becomes indoors again, moves indoors, and much more kind of should force myself out into the fresh air a bit more than I do. In fact, we've got a very good reason, I've got a very good reason, a thing to make me do it, and that's a kayak that, you know, doesn't have to wait for summer to be used. Could be put to good use on any calm and non-blustery day. Yeah, so maybe that would be my goal, is to, instead of having the hammock swinging times, maybe I'll make myself get out for a hammock? No, you know that thing, a paddle somewhere. Of course it's a bit more of a big deal, but I think once I've found a place or two that I like, then it'll be a lot less messing about. So far we've only put it in a canal, which was a good first spot for testing how you get in and out of the thing, because of course that is, when you've not done it before, that's a fun challenge, and you know, you sort of have your mind is a bit caught up with, oh my god, you know, what will I look like, an idiot falling into the canal? Will I tip it upside down? Will I look like a middle-aged old bloke struggling and flailing about on the side of the canal, which to some degree I did anyway, but we got in and out fairly dependably. So I feel qualified now to launch from other places. What would be good is to find out what it's like launching off a beach. I guess you have to get your feet a little bit wet to get in from a typical beach, because there's a certain depth of the skeg tail fin thing that hangs down. So you've obviously got to start off in water that's going to allow that to move over the sand or the rocks without getting broken. So I guess that's wet feet for the first beach launches. And of course you want not too rough weather, but I think realistically I'm going to have to plan some trips on my own, because Claire isn't really well enough most of the time to do this stuff. It's very difficult for her to have the energy. She's quite often not very well, so if I sort of keep it to, we only ever do it if both of us are doing it, could mean that we only get out once or twice a year, which is still nice, but it'd be nice to get a bit more of that wide open solitude space that you get when you're out in the water, a little bit away from land, whether it's on a river or an estuary or a seashore coastal bit. Anyway, so that's going to be my challenge, is to find somewhere and just go and do it. Right, so I've obviously distorted the tuning and everything, but now, if I recall from the last video, and it's in my notes, but I think this came with 10s on it, and I think Barry wanted me to change it to 9s. Well, I've got 9s written down as for sure, so okay, this is playing well. Fractionally high on this side here, so I'm going to go down. Let's just check. I've got 1.5 here. Okay. Yeah, I think I can afford to go 1/4 of a turn counterclockwise on all of these. 20 minutes of the hour I'm going to do on all of them. Will all be out of tune now, so if I just tune up. Okay, that's good. Nice and low, but just on the edge. What I might just do is, while I'm here, I might just do a tiny fraction more on the G. And the reason I'm doing that is that the G track is the place where, if you're going to get any bends on the high notes, it will be potentially in the G track. So I'll just do a tiny bit more leveling in there to make sure we bottom out those low frets just enough so their lowness doesn't choke out on bends, because as a guitar player, you'd want to be able to get some very big, at least whole tone bends, if not more, out of a guitar like this at the high end. Okay, fingers have gone black, but I'm happy with that. So I'll put the leveling, yes, the leveling bits away. Leveling beam into its magnetic home. So now, because this is loose, I'm going to take off the strings kind of alternately so it doesn't go flying off in one direction. And then I'll obviously need to stick it down with some glue. And there we go. And these strings now have done their duty, and we can get rid of them as they are no good for anything. They've been sacrificial strings once, and that's enough. Okay, off comes the nut. That's interesting. That one's appearing to be quite snug in that channel there. I wonder why. I'll check it when I get the other one, but that's unusual. It's unusual for it even to be snug on 10 strings, because the nuts are almost always made to work with a reasonable range of gauges, because if they didn't, you'd have to be changing your string gauge every time, sorry, your nut every time you change your string gauge, and of course that's clearly not practical. Just put this out of the way. These things, strings are hard to get rid of. Yeah, so we'll check that, and if there is any kind of slight grab on it, then we'll take. Oh look, these ferrules are loose. That's not fantastic. I don't know if you can see this. I'll show you now. They just fall out with gravity. I mean, that's okay, but I'm not going to do anything to them. If you, Barry, if you don't like this aspect of it, the fact that those are free falling, then I would suggest you put a little tiny dab of some kind of glue. Probably it doesn't matter too much what kind, just to keep them in place. But the only slight problem is that they're likely, possibly not necessarily likely, but they may fall out while you're doing other things. So you've got to be cautious about that. If you're doing it at home, it may be quite easy to lose them, which would be a pain. I'm just going to zoom out a bit. So time to do the crowning, and followed by the masking off the neck and polishing out, which I will do probably off camera as always, because it's just a boring, sweaty process. That belongs in the box. Yeah, sweaty, boring process. Anyway, I'm just going to gently lie that down, conscious of the neck being supported by the headstock, so don't do any pressing down with it like that. So, in order to recrown the frets, he said, drawing on the bleeding fretboard. In order to recrown the frets, you paint over the frets again, the ones we've just leveled, and I'm going to use the Stumac offset diamond leveling file, crowning file, that's the one, crowning file, to recrown. And all I mean by that is that where there's a flat spot, I want to reshape it so it's rounded off, but without affecting the height. So it's really important to keep the height that we've just achieved, because that was done it's done through a process of leveling. We don't want to ruin that leveling, so going to make sure that we keep it. It still is easier to do this actually. I'm going to make sure that I do it in a way that doesn't adjust the height at all. So I've got a crowning file here, which is a concave file that sort of fits over the top of the, or around the fret. I've got a little wire brush to clean any stuff that gets clogged up in there, which occasionally it does. And so I just run this file gently up and down, and you may see that the file, you can probably see, you see that the file has gone, that's what it looked like first. That's the, you can see the light shining off the black. There's a flat spot covered in black marker, and then what I've done is I've run that file across there, and it's reshaped the flat edges of the fret. Flat edge, the edges off the flat part of the fret. So these outside edges here, it's kind of rounded them off, but I've stopped doing it and left that little thin black line down the center of the fret, and leaving that line tells me that I've kept the playing of the height of the fret exactly the same, which is kind of important to do, which means the leveling that I've done is still relevant. So you can see when I do that first pass with the file here, and zoom in on it, and that first pass, you can see that there are certain parts of the fret probably need a little more attention than others. So this bit here, maybe that bit there, but it's very little kind of hard work required. And just move the file just slightly from side to side, and then I'll give it a little bit of a clean out to get rid of any marker pen kind of stuff. And then I kind of move along to the next one. I'll do this one in close up so you can get a better idea. Now in a minute there, you'll see at this end, can you see how much flatter that bit is there? And that's where it's telling us straight away that that fret is slightly high at the edges, because both edges have a little bit more of a flat spot. So now I'm going to focus a little bit more on this end here, as you can see, and then I'm going to not worry about the middle because that's pretty much already done. And I'm going to come to this other end here and spend a bit more time on that. And together, that gives me the best I can get out of that. I keep hitting this bleeding microphone thing. Yeah, that's the best I can get out of that fret with its different kind of areas of leveling. So again, the first swipe gives me a good idea of what state of the fret is. I sort of pretty much already know that, because when I'm leveling I can sort of see it showing up, but it's good to, this reconfirms what I've suspected. So if I zoom out just a little bit now, he said, hopefully. Yeah, so a tiny bit on the end, more on that end. So I've already cleared up that end, and then just a little bit more force and effort at that end. And each one I go to, it tells me that's pretty much hardly touched at all, so that's good and done. Then this one, again, very similar, a little bit of leveling all across, but it's a very even one, that's done, and so on. And it's great to be able to read. It confirms what you knew when you were doing the leveling, if you like, what I can see when I'm doing the leveling. So, and if there's a particularly high one, which we have got one somewhere, where's the high one? We've passed one already. Where's the other high one? Probably somewhere like here and here. There's a couple of high ones with high ends where they've taken off and flattened off a fair amount. Anyway, so that's the whole thing with this crowning. But like I say, most important of all is to leave that untouched little strip of black marker pen. If I accidentally go over it and the fret hasn't even been flattened at all, and the concave part of this file just goes over the top and scrapes off the marker pen on the top, I stop right there. Even if it has taken off the marker pen, that's not a disaster, as long as I don't keep on doing it. I just go, right, that doesn't need any recrowning, stop. This one's got a bit more in the middle to do, which I focus on. And then these are mostly at the ends, these next two. So I kind of lean into the end of each one. Kind of avoiding the middle really, because it doesn't need anything. Again, same. Very often you find that frets will need that extra leveling work at their edges, because it just seems to be the way it is when you press frets in. If they're going to stick up anywhere, it tends to be at the edges. Sometimes because the frets are maybe just slightly different radius from the fingerboard, and that's where it shows up most. Or maybe sometimes it's because the fingerboard itself rolls a little bit at the edges, and so the radius that is spot on for the rest of the individual fret suddenly might be too rounded at the edges, but the fret still sits where the radius of the fret wants to sit, so you get a little bit sticking up at the edge. But anyway, there's nothing on these or any difficulty at all. So in the process of leveling and recrowning those frets, one of the things that I was able to do, and I could see I was doing as we went along, was to kind of gently clear up any fret wear down on these lower frets. So that's a nice byproduct of the leveling process. And I say byproduct advisedly or deliberately, because I very almost never level frets with the sole intention of clearing up fret wear. I don't think it is generally a good trade, fret metal or fret life, for an aesthetic clear up. So I tend to think about it almost only as a nice bonus of the process of leveling frets. So I put glue on here. I'm now going to place this right down there, and I'm going to feel for either side of it to get it equidistant, because I saw before that it pretty well felt good where I put it, and it's about 0.5 millimeter short of the neck width, which gives it a little privileging, a little bit more space on the E if it's going to overhang, or sorry, underhang anywhere. I'd rather it was on this side, because it gives you a little bit more playing bend room. Okay, so the next part of the thing is to mask off the fretboard, which I'll do here. And I could have, theoretically, held off and put the, wonder if it's worth doing. Having the nut on first is actually a bit of a bind, because you can't quite get to the end. Let's see if it will accommodate me. Sorry about that, that was me. Okay, so that's now taken off my tiny thin shim. Brilliant. But I'll leave it there. It's stuck. The shim is actually stuck down there, so I'm fine with that. I'll leave it there in place, and then I'll put this on separately afterwards. Like I say, the shim is just a boot really for raising up, and I like to use the same material as the nut. So because it needed tiny raise, to be honest, I could have done it with 2 or 3 strips of incredibly thin aluminium foil. It's that little an amount it needs to raise up. You don't want to put a piece of paper under there, you don't want to put a piece of random plastic. So what I like to do is to find an old Tusq nut that I'm not using and sacrifice that. And often, well, not often, I always keep, when I make custom nuts, I always keep the offcuts of Tusq, because they come in perfectly handy for exactly that, building a little boot to give a nut a lift using the same material, and I think that's a nice way to do it. it has to be done, because if the nuts available aren't quite tall enough for the guitar, then there's nothing we can do if we want a good quality Tusq nut. We've got to raise it up. That's why I do like to use the adjustable ones all as much as possible. But this guitar headstock configuration is not really best suited for customizing adjustable nuts. It's got a sort of Les Paul Gibson style nut shelf, but it's got a 6-in line, and the combination of those two things is something I haven't kind of got a prototype for making. I do lots of Les Paul style adjustable Tusq nuts. There we go, I've run out of that. Yeah, lots of Les Paul style and lots of Strat style ones. Now let me see if I've got any spare enough over here. Oh, there's one, but they're not really the right size. I want a smaller one. Yeah, I better bring them out. These are been sitting around for quite some time. I'll have them down here just in case. Right, so what I'll do now is I'll revert to a load of pre-cut strips that I made earlier, and they'll do just a jolly fine job. At this point I can use the thicker pieces that I don't normally use, since I have the thinner tape, but I'm now using a combination of those to make it work. Yes, anyway. So, how's life, eh? Hope all's well. I hope you aren't suffering too much under the slightly crazy inflationary craziness that's going on at the moment. I think I can really feel it at the moment. I did something today which actually found quite difficult to do, and I had to psych myself up to doing it, and that is I increased my setup price today. And I think, like a lot of people who do things that they care about and believe in, you hate to put up your prices. I suppose because everything's expensive, and who likes prices going up. But the reason I did it was because I think for the last 2 years or more I hadn't put my prices up for about 4 years, something like that, or increased them. They've been the same anyway. So eventually you realize, you get to see the stuff. First thing you kind of notice is the immediate change in certain things that you buy fairly regularly. So really dreary, unexciting things like brown packing tape, which I buy 6 rolls of at a time, and then each roll is 50 meters, so it's a lot of material. Over the last 4 years, they've probably gone up from something like £15 for 6 to about £22 for 6, something like that, in all of that time. So that's a big chunk of increase. And you sort of notice it, and you just, for all the intervening time, I just keep on buying it and paying the increase. It doesn't go up in one go. Obviously, it goes up a bit by bit, but each time it goes up, over those last 3 or 4 years, I've just paid the greater price, and then it goes up again in a few months, and I pay the higher price, and so on. So you basically absorb all of the price increase. And eventually, in your heart of hearts, if you're going to behave like a sensible business, or if you don't just want to do yourself out of being viable, and so you have to quit the business, you've got to adjust your prices, because it isn't possible that you have to pay more for everything, but you never pass on those increases. In other words, you shield your customers from the cost of living increases by sacrificing any profitability you had, and that's noble and all the rest of it. And sometimes we try and do it. I think most people try and hold off until it's really not possible. But the question about when is it not possible is when you see that you really don't have enough profitability anymore to buy the shopping that you need to buy this week, or fix the car, or whatever it is you have to do. And it's then you realise that that's, I'm now at the effect, suffering from, the cost of living increase all around me and impacting on what I can and can't afford to do. And yet I'm trying to be noble and not put my prices up. So eventually there comes a time where the sort of the logical, rational side of you says you've got to put your prices up. So, and that was today. So today my setup cost went up to £135, which includes the adjustable Tusq, or fixed or adjustable Tusq nut, precision leveling of the frets like you've just seen, all over clean and polish, and a fix of any obvious issues like loose pots and wobbly jack sockets and all that sort of stuff. Right now I need very thin strips because we're on the 24 frets. Yeah, so that was a day I came to today, and I had to do it, and so I had to write it down in my kind of work business diary, and I had to sort of say it out loud to myself and to Claire and to other people in conversation to make it real, because what I couldn't afford to do is sort of chicken out when somebody goes, oh yeah, how much is it for one of your setups? And I sort of panic and go, oh, 125. And so today was that day where I made it real by saying it, and the work I've got in at the moment is all before that, so those customers get it at pre-price increase prices, which is cool. But yeah, but it's a difficult one, because you just think to yourself, where does it end? Where does inflation end? And actually, it's a bit like, there's the whole discussion going on in our culture, certainly in the UK anyway, about, we've got this cost of living, i.e. we're struggling with increased inflation, rising inflation, and so as soon as people's money in their wage packet doesn't buy enough to pay the groceries, or actually, some people it's as soon as it doesn't pay for the annual holiday, other people it's as soon as it doesn't pay this week's groceries for me and the kids or whatever. You get people in industry then, through unions, starting to demand or strike for higher pay, and it's kind of understandable, because if your pay packet is getting worth less and less, you're taking a pay cut. So the response that people do is they go and whatever we call it, petition for a pay rise, and of course it's like the continual passing on of this impact of the inflationary pressure. If you keep on passing it on, how can you ever get out of it? Because I put my prices up, you can't afford it, so you put your prices up, and then people can't afford your stuff, or they're not being profitable, so they put their prices up, and we keep on going forever and ever. It seems really unending. But I don't know how you get out of it. I wouldn't claim to know, and I don't really know the mechanism by which people got out of it in the old days, in the 70s when inflation was really high. I'm not sure I got the qualifications to understand it, even if I read a text on the subject, but I'd like to know, because it's an interesting, where does it end? Anyway, unfortunately I am not playing a part in ending it, because I've passed on the increase a little bit, but I've tried to keep it as low as possible for as long as possible. But there we go. I'd see it as self-respecting to do it eventually when you need to. Right, so I'm going to, am I going to switch off? I mean, I can just carry on doing this. It's all a bit noisy, but actually, you know what, it's almost too much faff to move things and turn things on and off. So what have I done? I have leveled, I have crowned, I have masked off, and now I'm going to polish, sand, and by sanding, polish out the frets. And the first, well, what I'm doing is I'm working through a series of grades of paper, and I'm going from 240 grit in my hand here, all the way up. So 240, 400, 600, 1000, 1500, then jumping across to a set of micro mesh pads, and on the micro mesh set I'm going from 1500 there to 18 to 24 to 32 to 36 to 4000 to 6000 to 8000 and 12, by which time it'll all be very shiny. But the logic with polishing out your frets is simply this: if you, well, simply put, you have to sand out the previous gauge of scratches left by the most recent sandpaper or file. So with this thing here, the StewMac file that I used for crowning is, I believe, 150 grit, which is pretty coarse. So hence I'm going next to 240. So the jump is from 150 to 240. Then I go to 400, then 600, and that should, step by step, eradicate all of the scratches from the previous gauge. Question of how much to use this paper, because at 240 grit this has got quite a lot of height or metal removal capability. So if you sort of scrape away at any one spot, you will take it down. You can run the risk, or you could run the risk of creating unevenness again. So at the 240 level, it's vitally important that you do everything equally. And even if you do take it down a little bit, you're taking it down the same amount. Then switch to the 400. Same applies. The 400 is the same grit as the grit on the leveling beam. So as you know, that can lower the frets because it does the leveling process. So again, we sort of play by ear, but more or less the same amount of pressure on all the parts equally. Like so. And I'm doing 2 of each grade, so that's 2 240s, 2 400s, 2 600s and so on. I remember when I worked in corporate business a few years ago now, but one of the things I remember seeing was when I was doing some work with the train operating companies in London, and one of the things that they were talking about when I worked with them is about reorganisation in in the company, but cost cutting or cost saving exercises. And I kind of learned, not being a particularly businessy person then, I learned quite quickly that one of the things about cost saving, and the reason why companies in trouble always go immediately to cost saving, is that it's so obvious. Sometimes you don't think about it until you have your own business to run, and then it becomes crystal clear. It's the idea that every pound you save in cost or every pound of cost you remove from your business, as they would say, that is a pound of profit you gain back, right? And people go, yeah, and so I save a pound. I spend a pound less on my paint, therefore I've saved a pound and it's in my bank account, right? And that's obvious, and we know that, but it's worth comparing that pound to the other ways you might get an extra pound in the business. And of course, when you look at many businesses' operating model, the amount they have to spend to get a pound is considerable. So they might spend 75p or more, whatever, to earn the pound. So that, they have to run the business, they have to, like the train companies, they have to pay the staff, they have to pay the offices, they have to pay for the train rentals and all that stuff. So if they're desperate to increase their profit, either to get them out of a financial hole, or just because, let's say, they've been given a target by a parent group to make X amount of profit quickly, it's why they will always go to cost cutting as the way to make that profit quicker, and they don't look at putting on more trains or packing more people onto the trains or advertising more days out or that kind of stuff. They do that in the longer term, but it's not the place, it's not the what they talk to, because it's much less profitable because of the cost of making that turnover. And even if you didn't have to pay, that turnover then gets taxed, and it's not the pound. It's still not a pound. And the fact is, even to acquire that pound of extra revenue, which gets taxed, you have to pay operating costs. So you would have to probably, let's say, sell 10 more passenger journeys to end up with a pound more profit. And that's a lot of hard work when you could just shut down the toilets over on that platform over there and save £10,000. You can see why companies have to make those decisions. And yes, of course, they're often decisions that we, the public, don't agree with, but if you were running a business and the shareholder, the major shareholder, told you had to suddenly come up with X amount more profit, you also wouldn't go looking for more sales. You would look to take cost out of your business first. And the same logic applies to anything, including re-love guitars. So if I want a couple of extra quid a month to, let's say, I don't know, put a tank of fuel and not worry about putting a tank of fuel and going down to the sea tomorrow, for example, then the question is how do I best make 50 quid profit with re-loved guitars? And by the logic I've just talked about, it isn't do 3 more setups or 2 more setups or whatever. It's spend 60 quid less on operating costs. So how and then it's a very different thing. Instead of advertising to get more customers and doing more setups per day or whatever, the question is looking around suddenly, how can I pay 60 quid less over a period so I can have it to spend? Well, obviously the other thing is if I save it on cost and it converts into profit, then obviously I do have to pay a proportion of that in tax, but it's smaller and easier than taking on X number of new jobs, additional new jobs. So it's always a good idea if you have a little business to, even if it's just for fun and it's not really business but it's a bit of a hobby, it's always good to ask yourself what costs can I take out? And of course, to do that, you have to first start by listing your costs, the regular costs. And of course, I don't have to look too far to know that the vast part of my costs of Relove guitars are parts. Then there's consumables. And after consumables, there's tools and rentals of things, digital things, internet services and things like that. But yeah, most of all is parts costs. So, for example, when I struck up got a repairer account deal with John Hornby Skews, that was fantastic. It saves me a few percent on Tusq stuff. So in going through the application and speaking to the people and telling them about the business and telling them what I do and the products that I would buy, a little bit of administrative stuff to invest gave me back some instant profitability by saving money that I would otherwise have spent buying the same parts I would still have bought because I need them for customer setups. So that was a smart way of increasing profit a little bit, or increasing profit, improving profitability. And then I guess you look at your regular stuff and you say, how do I normally buy all the parts for I get a couple of guitars or 2 or 3 guitars in from customers and I go through them, mark out or jot down and record everything I'm going to do. Then I make a list of things I need, whether I've got them already in stock, whether I need to get more. And then at some point I have a buying session where I sit at the computer and buy all the bits I need, and they come flying in via the mail and couriers and whatever. And the question then for me would be, am I hard-nosed enough about the buying process? And actually the truth is, do I buy the cheapest of everything? No, I don't. I have a sort of sense about, oh, that one looks a bit too cheap, I'm going to go for the reassuringly more expensive one, which actually could be a foolish luxury. That's just a foolish game, It may be completely inappropriate the way I'm thinking about that. So it would be smart to rethink how I buy and even right down to my mental attitude towards it. And I remember Claire and I went and did some sail training years ago in Lanzarote, and you sort of do a sun sail type thing, and you end up sharing your training boat with some other people. There's 2 other guys on the boat with us, and one of the guys was a kind of buying consultant or a procurement consultant. So he would go into big companies who, as you can imagine, had a massive list of things they bought every month, from materials to stuff that employees need and so on and so forth. Anyway, big companies, any company, always has a load of suppliers and they buy a load of stuff, and as you can guess, it's one of the quickest ways to lose your hard-earned profit is by incautiously spending it on acquisition of new materials and stuff. So you buy the wrong stuff, more expensive stuff. If you don't strike deals and you just pay whatever's asked with no questions, you can be just throwing away money that would otherwise be profit and help, keep you afloat and give you a better quality of life. So this guy would go to big companies and he would say, okay, I've looked at your procurement chain, and I conservatively believe I could save you £4.5 million per year on your current buying trends. And of course the company normally is all ears at that point. They're going, really? Okay, and what's your credentials? Who have you done it for before? Can I speak to them? Are they happy with your services? Were the products or the materials you bought good quality, and were there any implications? Blah, 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 blah. But when somebody's then confident that the person knows what they're doing, then this consultant would go and spend a few months rationalizing the company's procurement process, and if say a simple example being, say they're buying little different kinds of materials from different suppliers, and they're paying a sort of higher price because they're using small suppliers for each individual type of material. Then obviously the procurement expert will use their skill to try and find a larger scale supplier who can supply more at a better price, and so on and so forth. So it's kind of consolidating and what you do into a smaller number of suppliers is a good way, and that obviously gives you more buying power and more negotiating power, because you're buying more from a single supplier than you are spreading it out. And anyway, so you get the point. This consultant would basically go in and then kind of name a price, and they would say, if I save you 4.5 million quid, you pay me I don't know, 20% or whatever of what you saved. And the chief exec of the company kind of adds it all up and looks at the figures and says, well, I don't mind paying him whatever, 1.5 million quid or 20% or whatever it is, if he saves me this much money. And so off they go. And he seemed to be doing pretty well, working for companies doing exactly that. And in a way, I guess what I'm saying is that we will have to do that we have to be that consultant for our own companies when we're small businesses. But it's probably a good way to imagine it, that you see yourself as that. I've forgotten the guy's name, but we imagine ourselves, or I imagine myself being that guy and coming in to Relove Guitars and going, okay, Sam, now would you like me to save you X amount per year? Oh yeah, right. So here's what we're going to do, and I then tell myself what we're going to do. Namely, we are going to stop buying those cool things from, I mean, this is where the bottom line comes in, literally. We're going to stop buying those bridges from Northwest Guitars. Sorry, Northwest Guitars, I'm just using you as an example. Since they get them from Chinese suppliers anyway, I think you'll be better off buying a few more from a Chinese supplier and build in the time, because when you buy a sort of a Chinese roller bridge from a sort of known company that I enjoyed dealing with, people like Northwest Guitars and stuff like that. I've got nothing against them, but when you buy from them, you're buying a bit of ease. You're able to sort of relax and tell yourself that look, if anything at all goes wrong with this, he's got me covered. I know he does good customer service. In fact, I know he does. And that if something goes wrong, all I have to do is get on the phone or the text or something, and he'll put it right, and then I can get on with other stuff. By contrast, if I get into buying it from an eBay seller in China, waiting out the 3 weeks shipping time or whatever, then if it comes and it's faulty and the quality's not right, then it's actually quite a lot more complex to make decent, reasonable negotiations with Chinese factory suppliers, often because they don't want the thing back, and they'll keep offering you percentages off, which aren't any good to you, because you need the thing to be top quality in order to put on your customer's guitar. So you don't want a shoddy thing plus some money back. You want a replacement that's good quality. So there are good reasons to buy from people like Kevin, I think it is, at Northwest Guitars, and that's why I have. But if this guy I was telling you about were to come to Relove Guitars, he would say to me, look, your situation now is that you have to forego that more premium experience of buying from somebody who's taking the dirty work out of it for you. You're going to have to start buying it direct from China and saving the money. And you might say to me, you've got enough experience now to know what quality you need and what you don't need, and what things, what are the parts where the quality actually doesn't have a real significant impact. There's some things you can buy that there's no advantage at all buying from a UK supplier, other than convenience, so that you get them delivered in 3 days instead of 3 weeks. But a cost assessor would look at it and say, well, if you're 3 weeks, if you know you've got a regular need for these things, then 3 weeks delay from China isn't a problem at all. Just order up front, just be disciplined and get your order in time, and you can enjoy the economies of buying direct from China, so on and so forth. And in a way, it would be a shame not to buy from suppliers who I've enjoyed buying from along the way, but there are times where the hard-nosed will say to themselves, look, do I at this point in time, do I want to be loyal, or do I want to make some more profit for me, and have I got the ability to do it by buying direct? So that's where it comes down to in the end. Even little things like the what do you call it, sandpaper that I use in the setup you just saw, the different little squares. I used to cut those sheets into 2 pieces, so the full sheet would do 2 setups. Well, the full size set of sheets would then get torn down the middle, and each one would make a pack of papers for doing the levelling and sanding out. And then one day I thought, I'm kind of tying up a load of sandpaper, wrapping it around this block. It's kind of important to be able to wrap it round, but the sandpaper used to be a third as large again as this, and it used to come all the way up there, and so I was wasting sandpaper just using kind of the main bit here. So I decided to get 3 sets out of each stack of grades that I use for a sanding thing. So I kind of cut the expenditure by a third in one go, just by kind of being a bit more thoughtful about how I used that. And it's not something, I don't suddenly notice the extra money, but it's that way of thinking about it. It's just, why would you throw it in the bin if you could, be more effective with it? So it was little things like that, which is quite fun to do. And this doesn't represent. What I wouldn't do is, oh look, there's a Wilkinson tremolo bridge, which I really like the quality of. Oh, and there's a screw-in one by an unbranded one. So Wilkinson one, 40 quid, unbranded one, 20 quid. And would I go and put the 20 quid one in a customer's guitar to save me 20 quid? No, I would put the 40 quid one in, because it's that significant a part of a piece of equipment. Most of the time that's not a problem, because the customer and I will have a parts buying agreement anyway, and they're paying for the parts, and they will usually choose the better quality parts, full stop, which is good. But if it comes to a guitar I'm putting together with a view to selling, no, I won't put a 20 quid tremolo into the a Strat I'm making, even if I could, paper make that extra 20 quid for having put it in there. Let's say I can sell the guitar for 300 quid, but I can make an extra 20 profit if I hadn't put such a good quality tremolo in. They look pretty much the same, but I know that the Wilkinson is far better quality and far better easier to operate. So no, I wouldn't do it. I'd rather the quality of the experience or the product that somebody got from me was high, and I'd rather get repeat business than supply something that was barely adequate, or only just adequate. But I'm sure there are other things worth focusing in on to save or to reduce costs. But as I say, I guess you for your business, you start by looking at what are the costs in the business, and then as a result of that, which are the kinds of things you can, or what ways can you make economies and savings in terms of costs. Used to be, for example, I would buy naphtha in a 5 litre container, because at 5 litres, you get lots of small bottle refills out of a 5 litre naphtha thingy. And then the industrial kind of industrial factories or whatever seemed to stop making it and selling it to the public. I don't know why exactly, but it seemed impossible to get in 5 litres. And then I ended up, I think I bought 1 tin of Swan lighter fluid because I had to have some there and then, but that was so expensive by comparison. And then I had to then rapidly whiz around and try and find a better supply. And in the end I found a midway sort of, or mid-ranking supply, which was Coleman's cooking fuel, which is what I use now. And that comes in litre size for 10 quid-ish. Now the industrial stuff used to be 5 litres, I have to remember the cost now, 5 litres for, I think it was, I'm losing track, 5 litres for I think 25 quid at one point, something like that, so it was a £5 a litre. Now obviously Coleman's naphtha, or cooking fuel, is twice the price of that, but it's still a fraction of the price of buying it in tiny little Swan lighter refills. So it's not the ideal format to buy it in, cost-wise, but it's not the worst. And of course, if I could find a dependable supply, industrial-sized supply of naphtha, I would jump at it. But I've got a few big tins of stuff down there that claimed to be naphtha, but actually doesn't work at all well. For example, I got one that I stopped using immediately because it didn't evaporate the way naphtha does, and it left a greasy and oily residue, which it didn't harm the finish, but you had to really wipe it off. In addition, you're doing more work trying to get rid of this slightly oily residue. Anyhow, so that is a place where you can save on cost. It's quite cool if you find something that really is effective. It is like a little jackpot. You get a payback immediately. When I look at my figures, I don't know, let's say I turned over, I'm going to invent this, right? Let's say I turned over 30 grand in a year. I guarantee you 2/3 of that I was spent in parts. So I don't have a huge amount of profit in the business because the actual outgoings on parts is significant. And that's why small businesses can't really compete with any of the larger ones who have the advantage of the economies of scale, large-scale buying. And that's why all those companies tend to amalgamate and form larger and larger partnerships, and there's constant acquisitions, mergers and acquisitions to increase the size, because suddenly, really importantly, as soon as you get to a certain size, you have a completely different level of buying power. So you get completely, people want your business in completely different ways because you're buying such a great volume of stuff, and you command much better prices, and you have much more power at the negotiating table when it comes to deals and stuff. So, you know, for people who want to become profitable, small is never effective. Yes, being big costs the personality often of the company and the, you know, the homeliness of small businesses where everyone knows everyone else, and all of that stuff gets lost. But the shareholders that drive the businesses to increase in their corporate size do so because it's, you know, their interest is not what it's like to work there, and do they have a nice time with all their chums, all feeling like they're part of the local business. They don't care about that. They care about maximising the corporation's profits. And of course, before I was in business, I didn't realise the kind of legal aspect of it, and it always struck me as interesting that I didn't know that a company director, chief exec or whatever, has a legal obligation to maximise profits for their shareholders. And that's quite amazing that you are breaking some sort of law if you don't behave in ways that maximise profit. So I'm not letting off psychopathic CEOs for occasionally, sometimes amoral behaviours in business, but often when you see the public sort of at a meeting protesting the decisions that somebody's made, you can often hear that they don't know that that what they feel is inhuman and cruel and not fair on the general public. They often don't know that the chief execs are legally bound to maximise profits, no matter how inhuman or unkind it may seem to the rest of us in everyday civvy street. It's their legal obligation to do whatever it takes, and that's of course why, coming full circle with my little ramble, sorry if it's bored you or enraged you, but coming full circle, that's why the first place that even nice chief execs who you really respect the first place they go when a parent company asks them to increase profitability, or they've hit a crisis and they have to effectively make money fast, first thing that the otherwise nice, decent chief exec will do will be to go straight into cost cutting mode, because that's where they get the fastest profitability from. Okay. Okay, so what I've done is I've put the strings on, and 9s this time, and I'm going to recheck the neck relief actually, because having put 9s on, it's flattened out a little bit more, which is actually okay. There's still a gap there, that's how I'd like it. So it was a little bit higher than before, but now there's not so much string loading, it's flattened out a bit. And what I'm just doing now is I'm just stretching out by hand the strings. It's usually the wound strings that hold the most slack, but my advice is, and this is advice to Barry, your primary, or where your tuning stability comes from, is not your tuners. It comes from your nut and the nut slots, so they have to be the right material, least friction possible, not dragging on the strings and so on. Your nut and its least friction, and the other 50% is in the unreleased slack in your strings. So you get the nut right, that's half of it. You get the strings fitted and fully stretched out, that's the other half. And your guitar will stay in tune most of the time if you do those things. And so the question of how long do you stretch the strings for is basically until they no longer detune, and that's really what you're looking for. And once they have stopped detuning when you stretch them, then they will be ready to play, and they'll go into tune very easily and they'll stay in tune. Obviously with nines you've got to be a little bit careful when you get to the thin strings, because they are tendency to break is, you know, when you're stretching them is quite high. In here we're pretty close. Right, and the last thing I will just do is get the electric cable, the guitar cable, and we'll just check and tweak the intonation. So we're nearly done after the pause. Hope you didn't mind the gap, but we had to wait for the new nut. Even though it wasn't quite deep enough a nut to do the job. Thank you. That's the problem. It's very difficult to interrogate the various sites to try and get the exact heights. So for setting the intonation, checking and setting the intonation, we want to tune the pinged harmonic to an E, and then fret it, and it should be the same note. And this is actually flat, so it means it's too long. If it's flat, it means the strings is fractionally too long. So what I then do is get me a screwdriver, and I'm going to just slack this string off a bit, and so I'm going to basically drag, sorry, what I'm talking about, it's too long. I'm going to push forward the string, the saddle a little bit, and then retune it. So too long, I need to pull forward the saddle that way. When you slack a string off and then retighten it, you'll always get a bit of slack in there, so it's worth giving it a little pull. And going up to pitch. Pretty much. Still fractionally too long, so I'm going to again push it forward a tiny bit. And this time, because I know it has to go forward, I'm not slacking off, because I know it's undoing it, so it's not putting any pressure on the screw. Managed to tune that to, come on, E, please. Yeah, that's pretty on. So now what I'm going to do by the same token, I'm going to push forward the B to about a millimetre back. The G is now in the right place, and the rest of them look like they're in the right place now. So if anything, that's maybe still a tiny fraction too long, so I'm going to pull those back. And I'm doing everything else a little tweak as well, but I think we're getting close anyway. We know the E's all right. Hooray. Happy, right, intonation sorted. I'll just double check this here. That's all good. Everything's good. We've done the neck up, but I'll just check it again. Make sure it's nice and tight. Yep. 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 All is good. Happy, happy, happy. There we go. So that's the guitar done, set up after a break of a few days to wait for the correct nut to come through. Ta-da! So thank you very much for watching. I'm not going to play it because it's left-handed and it would sound terrible. Worse than normal. So you'd be spared. Alright, but that's it for tonight. Thank you for watching. Next few guitars coming up. We've got a Variax. Was it a JT59 Variax, which looks great. I'm looking forward to that. We've got a Westfield E4500 Les Paul, gorgeous looking thing. We're going to fit a new bridge, new pickups and adjustable Tusq nut. And then we've got a Telly and a Squire Strat, a standard series Telly and a Squire Affinity Strat, I think. We've got a Harley Benton Fusion, and it's got to come out of its box tomorrow and get some setup work done. And we've got a couple of builds on the go. We've got the ultra wide 6-string that's got to get back into production now. I've got the pickups finally, although one's slightly smaller than the other pickup, but we'll make it work because we can. And then I've got a custom bass build for Joe to kick off, and probably another sewer looking guitar for Nick in the States. Not Nick in the States, the YouTube channel owner, but Nick S. I'm thinking, is it Nick S? Is it Nick? No, yes. Oh my god, I've suddenly forgotten his surname. Anyway, Nick in the States. So there we go. Lots coming up, lots of things to do. And see you soon. Bye.